Hi everyone, so today we're talking about deep cervical fascia. This is the fascia which covers the neck basically. So it has six layers. First of all, you have investing layer, investing layer of deep cervical fascia. Then you have pretracheal fascia, you have prevertebral fascia, you have carotid sheath, you have buccopharyngeal fascia, and then you have pharyngobasilar fascia, right? So these are the six layers. Now, investing layer is very important and it basically forms a collar around the neck. This forms the roof of both the interior as well as the posterior triangle of the neck, and that I've already taught in the video where we were covering the posterior triangle of the neck, right? Then you have pretracheal fascia. As the name suggests, this is in front of the trachea. That means it covers the thyroid gland. Not just it covers the thyroid gland and forms its false capsule, but it also holds the thyroid gland in suspension with the help of suspensory ligament of Berry. This ligament of Berry basically prevents the thyroid from falling into the sternum, right? And then moving forward, we have prevertebral fascia. This forms the roof of the posterior triangle of the, floor of the posterior triangle of the neck. This forms the roof of the posterior as well as interior triangle of the neck. This forms the floor of the posterior triangle of the neck. Then we have carotid sheath. As the name suggests, it has a lot of things to do with the jugular vein, carotid artery that we'll cover. Then we have the buccopharyngeal fascia, which covers the buccinator muscle as well as the pharynx. Then you have pharyngobasilar fascia. So starting off with the investing layer, it lies deep to the platysma and it surrounds the neck like a collar. It forms the roof of posterior as well as the interior triangle of the neck. Its attachments. So superiorly, it is attached to the external occipital protuberance, superior nuchal lines. So external occipital protuberance and superior nuchal lines. That's one thing. Then mastoid and styloid process, external acoustic meatus and tympanic plate, and base of the mandible. Between the angle of the mandible and the mastoid process, this fascia splits to enclose the parotid gland. So another very important thing about the investing layer of deep cervical fascia we found out is that it covers the parotid gland, right? And what about pretracheal fascia? It covers the thyroid gland. Other than that, what did we discover? We discovered that this makes the roof of anterior and posterior triangle of the neck. And what about this? This forms the floor, right? Floor of the anterior and posterior triangle of the neck. What are we talking about? Prevertebral fascia. So let me just jot all of that down. Floor of posterior triangle of neck. Other than that, it's important for you to know this forms ligament of Berry and this forms axillary sheath or axillary ligament. And also its interior layer is known as alar layer. Okay, then this is a carotid sheath and buccopharyngeal fascia. Right, buccopharyngeal fascia. Okay, we'll talk about that when we're discussing it. Now, talking about the boundaries, superiorly, I've told you. Then between the angle of the mandible and the mastoid, you need to touch it right now. Mandible angle, and then behind it is the mastoid. So in between that place, this fascia is going to split into two parts, and that's going to enclose the parotid gland. The superficial lamina is named as the parotid fascia. It is thick and dense, and it is attached to the zygomatic arch. The deep lamina is thin, so the superficial one is thick and the deep is thin. Good. Then when you talk about its attachment, it's attached to the styloid process, the deep one, right? The tympanic plate as well as the mandible. Between the styloid process and the angle of the mandible, the deep lamina is thick and forms the stylomandibular ligament. So very important thing that I missed here was stylomandibular ligament also. So not just it forms uh, the covering or the fascia of parotid gland, but it also forms the stylomandibular ligament between the angle of the mandible, right, and the styloid process. So first we spoke about mastoid process and mandible where it splits and encloses the parotid. Now we're talking about the styloid process and the angle of mandible. The deep fascia, it is thick and it forms the stylomandibular ligament. So styloid and mandible angle. So this is stylomandibular ligament. I might have a photo of it. Let me just see stylomandibular ligament. Does it have a diagram here? No, it doesn't, but it's okay. Stylomandibular ligament. Then moving forward, we have um, now this stylomandibular ligament. It is going to separate the parotid gland from the submandibular gland. So stylomandibular ligament, it separates parotid gland from the submandibular gland, and it is pierced by external carotid artery. Let me just search a diagram of the stylomandibular ligament. Yes. No, stylomandibular ligament. You can see this is the stylomandibular ligament right here. So styloid process and mandible. And then the other thing we have to search about is that it is pierced by the external carotid artery, and it separates the parotid gland from the submandibular gland. So that's something you need to know. Stylomandibular ligament separates parotid gland from submandibular gland, and it's pierced by the external carotid artery. Now, at the base of the mandible, it encloses the submandibular gland. It also encloses the submandibular gland. So not just the parotid gland, but also the submandibular gland. The superficial lamina is attached to the lower border of the mandible, and deep lamina is so its superficial lamina is attached to the lower border of the body of mandible, and the deep lamina is attached to the mylohyoid line. So this is not just it covers or encapsulates the parotid gland, but also the mandibular gland, right? So submandibular gland. Right here, notice that also mandibular gland. And yeah, stylomandibular ligament. Stylomandibular ligament, what does it do? It separates your submandibular and parotid gland. Other than that, it is pierced by the external carotid artery. Right, moving forward. Now we have to talk about what are these acromion and all of that. Let me see. Inferiorly, it is bounded by spine of scapula. Then you have acromion, which is acromion process of scapula. Then you have clavicle, the spine and acromion of scapula, clavicle and manubrium. The fascia splits to enclose the suprasternal and supraclavicular spaces. So it also splits to enclose suprasternal and supraclavicular spaces that I'll tell you. So suprasternal and supraclavicular spaces, but not just that, it encloses two of everything, two of these muscles, two of the salivary glands, two of the spaces. So I'll tell you that. So first of all, two of the muscles, trapezius and sternocleidomastoid. These are covered by the nesting layer of deep cervical fascia, and they're also innervated by the axillary nerve, the spinal accessory nerve, sorry, accessory nerve, right? Then it also encloses salivary glands, parotid, and submandibular. It enclose, encloses the suprasternal and supraclavicular. So suprasternal and supraclavicular. And these are the contents of suprasternal and supraclavicular spacing if you want to learn. It also forms pulleys to bind the tendons of the two muscles, digastric and omohyoid. It forms the roof of anterior and posterior triangle. So two of everything. It forms stylomandibular ligament, right? And the parietomesenteric fascia. Now, posteriorly, it is bounded by the ligamentum nuchae and spine of seven cervical vertebra. Anteriorly, symphysis mentae and hyoid bone. Yes, that's it. Now, what happens is that parotid swellings are very painful because of the unyielding nature of the parotid fascia. Now, parotid fascia has a very unyielding nature, because of which the parotid swellings are quite painful. And when we're excising the submandibular salivary gland, external carotid artery should be secured before dividing it. Otherwise, it may retract to the stylomandibular ligament. So, stylomandibular ligament is uh, pierced by external carotid artery. So, whenever you're excising submandibular salivary gland, which is also enclosed by this fascia, the deep the investing layer of the deep cervical fascia. So when you are excising that muscle, that gland, you have to also ensure that the external carotid artery is secured in place, because retraction of the stylomandibular ligament can cause serious bleeding. Then division of external jugular vein in supraclavicular space may cause air embolism and consequent death, because the cut ends of the vein are prevented from retraction and closure by the fascia attached firmly to the vein, because it has an unyielding nature, so it ensures everything is attached very firmly. Now, when we talk about pretracheal fascia, I've already told you this encloses the thyroid gland. It forms a false capsule. Now, this forms the ligament of Berry. Very important. What does it form? It forms the ligament of Berry. What exactly is ligament of Berry? It helps to hold the thyroid gland in suspension, right? So, ligament of Berry, there's another very important thing about that. That posterior layer of the thyroid capsule is thick on either. What is the posterior layer of thyroid capsule? So, thyroid capsule is formed by the pretracheal fascia. Its posterior layer is thick and it forms a suspensory ligament for the thyroid gland known as the ligament of Berry. The ligaments are attached chiefly to the cricoid cartilage. Cricoid cartilage is of the um, cricoid cartilage and makes into the thyroid cartilage. They support the thyroid gland and do not let it sink into the mediastinum. The capsule of the thyroid is very weak along the posterior borders of the lateral lobes. So on the lateral lobes, the posterior border, the fascia is very weak. And the fascia provides a slippery surface for free movements of the trachea during swallowing. And another very important thing about what do you call this? Where is my book?